We're going to call this meeting to order. Can we get a roll call, please?
LeBlanc,
Here.
Benton, Denham,
Here.
Yancey,
Here.
Meenan,
Here.
McConnell,
Here.
Milton,
Here.
Westfall.
Here.
Mayor, you have a quorum.
Thank you. We'll start the meeting off with the approval of the Finance Committee minutes from the June 30th meeting.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Thank you. Then we'll move into the review and approval of disbursements of $50,000 and greater. And I understand Ben is online or on Zoom.
I am.
Hello, Ben.
Hello, good morning.
There you are. Good to see you.
Good. I'd say good to be there, but I'm not there.
You're in spirit.
That's right. That's right. So the disbursements, there really wasn't a whole lot unusual here. Obviously, work continues to happen on a mill and overlay, along with just normal expenses coming through. You see some 76 highway project expenses as well. So there really isn't anything unusual, even though these are fairly large expenses.
Does anybody on the board have questions or comments about these?
I do not. They look pretty normal to me.
And then is Exhibit 2 there, Ben?
Yeah, they're just, it's
a
two different.
continuation?
2 different months.
Yeah, right. Continuation.
Okay. Well, if there's no board member with comments, and I'm entertain a motion to accept
I'll make a
these.
motion to approve June and July.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Thank you. We have to slow down, Ben, because these meetings normally take a couple, 3 hours.
I'm going to take it easy on you this month. This next month, it gets rough.
Okay, so Ben, lead us off in our dashboards, please.
You betcha. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. Interesting performance, I think, in July and August. We were able to get August plugged in before this meeting took place. Some of the graphs do show, like sales tax does show August information. Just kind of a rundown. July was 11% month over month increase or down. Sales tax was down 11% month over month for July. August was up 28% month over month. So you can see the climb here in August. The peak happens in September. I think we talked about this last month's meeting, where September is really most of the summer's point of sale. So we can see a lot of the peak activity come through, and the sales tax we'll receive in September. So we're still on our way up, if you will. More times than not, so far this month, we've been exceeding last year's numbers, 2021. The cumulative, which is at the bottom, and I'll hit that in a minute. Cumulative is a total of 13% over 2021, and that's 27% over 2019. So through August, retail sales is just knocking it out of the park. It's maintaining kind of a higher level of sales. Our forecast, when I put the forecast together, if we look at sales tax and make an assumption, there you go. If we make an assumption that September through December, the rest of the months are 3%, and this is arbitrary, 3% under what it was for 2021. We still come out 6% ahead of 2021. I think 3% is probably overly conservative. And as we continue to progress, you can see that trend in that black line The cumulative has been up above the blue line, a fairly significant gap, maybe not as big a gap as it was last year from 2021 to 2019, but it's still up and over. So there is a significant possibility that we come in 8, 9, 10% over of 2021. The real magic is going to be what's 2023 look like. And if I had a crystal ball, I'd love to be able to tell you what that number is. So far in sales tax, we're estimating about 14.7 million at the end of 22. And contrast that against our budget. Our budget was 1% over the previous year, which was 11.9 million. So 14.7 versus the 11.9 million dollar budget. That's a fairly good sized gap, positive gap at that.
Excuse me a second, Ben, just for clarity.
Yep.
When we're looking at well, for example, the August number,
Yes,
since it's sales tax, that runs through the state, so that represents June's business, is that correct?
correct. It would be August is June, July. Right, that's right. June, July. And June, July sales tax. So if you went down to a store and bought something in June, it would show up, June or July, it would show up in August.
Yeah.
More than likely it'd be June.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if we're going to get to this, so I'll just ask it now.
Sure.
One caution I have is you can see the reported number in September, which would be basically July sales. That September number in 21 was just off the charts.
It was.
And so I think that will be a pivotal month of what we can anticipate for this year and going forward. It would be great to think we're going to meet that number or even come close to that number. Because even on this chart, it shows that was really an anomaly. When I say anomaly, that was just our big summer business.
Absolutely.
And I don't know that the city's been feeling that same attendance level. In fact, we won't get into it now, but I know you're tracking the traffic counts also, which gives us.
Yeah, we'll touch on that too. Yeah,
Okay,
definitely.
then go ahead, I'm sorry, yeah.
No, it's a good observation. I do want to contrast that against tourism tax though, but in a minute. So public safety sales tax, overall public safety sales tax is going to be about $1 million if we use, again, they use that 3%, the 97% of September, October, November, December. It'll still be $1 million over what it was for the budget. Within public safety sales tax. Transportation sales tax is going to be around 860,000 over budget. Both of those are, in my mind, conservative numbers, but Mayor, like you said, September is going to be pivotal. And as soon as we get it, I'll be interested to see so we can put that in our presentation for September, and we can give the board an update on where everything is. Because that sales tax is going to really determine where our 22 ends up and how much we've got to allocate toward projects. Tourism tax. This is the one I want to contrast against the sales tax. So you asked if we continue to see what we did in 2021 against this year. So cumulative tourism tax is only 3% above 2021 through July. It's above 2019 by 43%. So it was significant increase. Here we've only got July. We don't have August tourism tax in yet because it comes later in the month. So it hadn't been plugged in. So typically it's just July we report to you. So in contrasting sales tax versus tourism tax, that tourism tax is still up over 2021 cumulative, but that gap is narrowing, where the sales tax is still on pace with a consistent gap. So that kind of tells me either tourism's down a little bit. When I say down, keep in mind that down is still way over 2019.
Right.
So it's still still a very positive outlook on tourism tax. But here you see August is going to be a pivotal month, and it's typically the highest month we get for the year, and then it starts to dip down. I want to come back to not just this chart, but a chart that we have that you had me build into this, Mayor.
And
So-
there, and there again, for clarity, the tourism tax, since we collect direct, that runs approximately 1 month behind, where the sales tax runs 2 months. So this is that same,
Absolutely.
this is that same figure we're all going to be looking for.
Absolutely. Yeah, and against budget, if 3% lower for the remainder of the year, we'll be dead even with last year's total collections. And that might not be I don't know that that's too conservative a number. Again, August is really going to determine where we land. Even dead even with 2021's collections, will be 3.7 million over our budget that we set for 2022.
Wow.
So those are really good numbers to work with, at least with the departments. We do have numbers in here. These are all reflected, just a dashboard, what is in the monthly reports. So any of the detail that you want to see is back there within the monthly report section. The amusements and theaters are, well, I should say amusements are a little bit down from 2021, but still well over 22 or 2019. Theaters are fairly dead even with what we had last year. The campground is a little bit lower than what it was last year, 2021, but that's fairly understandable as travel was really down in 2021 as far as people that could fly. I mean, they were looking for local places to go, and they camped out. But again, that's still well over 2019. Restaurants and concessions are chugging along. The utilities are really on par with any expectations. They're coming in right where they were in 2021, so there's really no surprises. And just as a reminder, the reason I put sales tax, tourism tax, and utilities in here is the top 75% of your revenues are really the driver for your budget across citywide. And we'll go into that more detail in September when we bring the budget back. The property tax is so far it's really on par with what we expected to see. When we look at the general fund, and this should have numbers on it, I'm not sure why, but general fund revenues over expenses still so far this year. So that's not a surprise. Water, sewer, utilities are really on par with revenue over expenses, and we're coming into some of the hottest months. So we're heading through some of the hottest months, what would be the hottest months of the year. As far as budget's concerned, this says 50%, but what it is 58% of the year has actually transpired. 47% is what should be here for, but budget to actual on expenses. Same thing on water sewer. We're way under what water and sewer would be. Cash balances overall, general fund, the big ones that we watch obviously is the cash balance within the general fund is a pretty healthy number. Transportation sales tax, you can see it's up over 2021, and that as a result of so far the performance within the revenue piece. Capital projects are another piece in that. The board this week was talking about the public safety building and being able to fund that. You can see public safety sales tax. Overall, the fund itself altogether is around $5 million. I'm sorry, that's 262. That's the police part of it. I've got to adjust that label there. And the fire is just a little bit down, but it's still healthy. And that's just as a result of bills coming through. And so that's still a very healthy number. Tourism, we've got 19.6 million. You can see this is a result of what some of those revenues that are coming in were way up. So there's plenty of balance to work with. But before I move on to this next set of slides, do you have any questions over the ones I just went over?
Does anybody in the audience have any questions on this? Any board members? I know we went through that quick. What Ben has done is he's taken the detailed line items and he has graphed it to give us just a more general overview of how we're trending.
Right.
We also have the same spreadsheets that we've had in the past to review the actual numbers. Are you going to go through those, Ben, or is that?
I wasn't going to walk through the spreadsheets. If a committee, if you want me to, I can. But I wasn't going to go through those.
Have you reviewed the spreadsheets? Okay.
Yeah.
I think at the last meeting that I was able to attend, we had discussed kind of doing this overview. And because we get the agenda and the spreadsheets in advance, if any members on the committee had questions, they could go
Review
through those
those
in advance and bring specific questions that finance could answer.
Thanks for saying that, because that was the intent of, yeah.
Your Honor,
Yes.
if I may ask, for the public ease of access, these are all under reports on the website.
Thank you for saying that.
And so they go out, all these will go out under the financial reports. So they're easy to find. You don't have to find them inside each meeting.
And the public can also access the actual spreadsheets that we used to go through line item, and all that information is on the web.
Correct, with these
With these charts.
Charts, exactly what you're seeing under this meeting is also moved out to the website, so you don't have to find it in the meeting.
That's excellent.
Mayor,
Absolutely.
I have a quick question.
Would you pull your mic up, Betsy? Pull your mic up a little bit.
Sorry. On the public safety tax, on the cash balance, have we, as a city, actually purchased the theater? Is that balance, are we financing that? Are we paying for that? Is that still moving forward? Kind of a quick update on, does this balance include that purchase or not?
Okay, so this balance, that, the amount that we're using to purchase the White House is in this number. We're going to be pulling out $2.5 million to purchase the building, and we're going to pull out the funds for the initial architect contract. And then Ben's going to provide us with a couple options of how we want to finance the difference.
That's right.
And one question, just so we can make this public, one question I've asked is, we have a lot of cash sitting in our investment accounts. And when I say a lot, it is a lot. So one question, and Ben, I'd like this to be one of the options as you go through our options. One option would be, is it feasible, is it prudent to take the funds we have sitting in an investment account, let's say it's $7 million, $8 million. Is it prudent to leave that $8 million in an investment account that's earning 0.5% or 1%? And when we go to bond, I don't know what the bond rates are now. I know there's been increases, but Ben, is it in the 5-6% range?
Right now it's 3.5 to 4.5% is the range that we're seeing them competitively sold.
So one thing I wanted to at least look at is, would we want the city funds to provide the loan to the public safety tax and have them repay the city versus going and getting a bond?
I think that makes a lot of sense. If the money's there and it's only drawing 0.5% interest, and if the bond rates are 3.5 or 4%, and so you can borrow from the general fund at a 2% rate, you're going to save the public safety tax money,
That's right.
and ultimately that investment account would get reimbursed
And those
still
bonding-
at a higher rate than
Yes.
what it would collect.
So I
sitting
want
in an
that to be at
account.
least an option for us to look at. Plus, the cost to bonding tends to be hundreds of thousands. I mean, a huge number to go through that bonding process. So Ben, is it next month you're planning on sharing with the board some of your options for this, for the White House?
Absolutely. We're working on that now. Actually, I've got, we started working on it before before the decision was made on some of those options. So we'll bring those down to final final recommendations and have the board choose. That's a good point, Mayor. The city has the ability to lend to itself, and given the size of the investments, that's definitely a possibility. Obviously, those investments need to be mature or start to mature in the same size as we're going to need for the construction of the
Sure,
White
sure.
House.
And
Yeah.
I think I would just want to be super careful with the public safety tax, that we don't strap it to a point that it can't do what it was also designed to do, which is hire additional personnel. If
Yeah.
people voted for this for our community to be safer, which meant more firefighters on staff, more police officers on staff. So we don't want to tax it so much, building a building that we can't afford
Yeah, no, you're right.
extended
And
periods.
so when we
of
look at
new
these
staff.
options, I'm looking at the cash flow. And so out of public safety tax, they would be having to pay for the bonds. If, like you
Right.
said, if it was a 2% or a lower amount, it would provide more revenue, right, for the public
And a
safety
lower
tax.
payment.
And a lower payment, which would help everybody, I think. Looks like Chief has something to add.
May I throw a crazy concept out at you? This is way out in right field, to your point.
Throw it.
You've just identified funds, Ben, I'm watching your face as I say this, that are beyond the reserves. I'm a firm believer in reserves. I'm a firm believer in being conservative. We've had the conversation that there's been no increase. We are a general revenue funded department, fire and police, not a public safety fund funded department. We brought an additional revenue to the city to support public safety. So if we've not had an increase since 2017 to support the 40 people I had budgeted and the 3 fire stations, we've taken all that increase and taken it out of the public safety revenue funds since the tax passed, which was designed to add personnel and to build the fire station and to do the public safety center and add patrolmen. So my crazy out and right field question is, if we had, Ben, if we had $6 or $8 million sitting above reserves for the entire city, could that be restructured to offset some of the building costs, kind of in trade for the lack of support since
Well,
17?
Let me address that. We are already, we're on the same page, and we're already ahead of that. Something that we're looking at, and it's premature, Ben hasn't been able to provide the information yet, but it's coming shortly. Shortly meaning 30 days. My intent is to, understanding there was no increases in that 2017 number, right, 7 million. I'm looking for a couple questions to be answered. One is, if we went retroactive to 2017 and did the calculations, what would either the cost of living increase be year over year, and fund that into the public safety tax where it should have been, and then continue to pay it annually.
Yep.
Another way to look at it is, what was the percentage of the city's revenue increase or decrease in 20, but what was the city's percentage of revenue increase, and take that same percentage and apply it to public safety, and there again, retroactively back to 2017, refill that bucket, if you will, and continue to pay that forward. Because I've always felt strongly, Betsy has always felt strongly, it's the right thing to do, it's what should have been done, and the response of, we just don't have the money, doesn't answer the question, it's only fair. So I was hoping to come to you and Chief Matthews shortly and say, with Ben's guidance, here's what we as a city's planning on doing with our funds to make public safety tax fund healthy, make it what it should have been from day one. And I think that's going to be a fairly significant number, and it only makes sense moving forward.
We saw a draft in our directors meeting the other day that was a percentage proposed, which was very small, but it was a step in that direction. It was what the general revenue could afford based on Ben and his team's projections. And I appreciate you looking at it. Just felt like that, I want to make sure that we get past this phrase of this public safety tax, because there's more than the public safety tax. We're part of the city as well in general revenue, in police and fire. And so I want to make sure that we support that structure of what we had in 2017, because the public safety tax will not sustain the entire departments, both
Chief,
departments.
you are 100% correct. In fact, anybody who would argue what we just said, a logical way to look at it is if it was $7 million in 2017, this is a good year because everybody's very aware that inflation is not just a word, it's real. So if you had 7 million in 2017 and you look 10 years out, how much buying power is that same 7 million? And then to make it ridiculous, if it was 20 years out, right? That 7 million would be equivalent to 3 million or some crazy, ridiculously low number. So it doesn't make sense without having an increase. I'm just pushing to not just start it now, but I'm pushing to make the public safety tax whole of where it should have been back in 17.
And I appreciate that support. I want to make sure very clear that I'm not just saying public safety, that you've heard me say this phrase before, that our mission as a city is to provide essential fire, police, water, sewer, streets, parks. So I'm not saying just public safety. They all need managed growth as well. But so
Chief,
does
you
that
keep
17.
stealing my thunder.
What'd you say, Ben?
You're stealing my thunder. I've got a finance director's report.
That's my hint to go
gonna
sit down now. Thanks for the time.
Yeah, exactly.
Does anybody
Yeah,
else have
abs-
questions that want to ask Ben that he's about to cover here pretty soon? You're on, Ben.
The next two graphs are brand spanking new. The data's not, but the graphs are. Mayor, this is one of your suggestions. Public Works keeps track of the vehicle counts. They keep track of a lot more than vehicle counts. Vehicle, pedestrian, sidewalk, you name it, they keep track of it. And then all throughout the city. So one of their questions was, how does the vehicle counts, as a leading indicator, especially on Highway 76, the main thoroughfare, how does that compare with tourism tax? And does that give us an ability to forecast into the future? We looked at tourism tax and sales tax. And I've got this set up as really a dashboard behind a dashboard to where we can select different years in vehicle counts and compare that to that year's tourism tax. So this is only one of the examples. The counts in 2021, you can see in the light green, and then the dark bars are the 22. Statistically, they're almost dead even every month, within a few tens of thousands, if you will. That sounds like a lot, but when you're looking at 6 million visitors a month, that's not. In August, this is just through the weeks that this chart was made. So we keep track of, Public Works keep track of it on a weekly basis, and they do a great job at looking at this. So what this is doing is showing the tourism tax, right? 1 month in past in point of sale compared to what those vehicle counts look like. So you can see January, February obviously is our low months, being the colder months, but then we scoop up into March and we start the increase March through the summer. And you can see that tourism tax pops right up there. And for some reason, it took a little bit of a dip, but overall, the trend you can see on the counts go up on both years. And then when you look at the tourism tax, it's doing the same thing. I went back and looked at this for 2021 and 2020 and 2021 and 2019, and saw almost identical bar charts that happen here. So the answer is yes, we can definitely use this to zero in on what the rest of the years look like. I've got an economist, Colby Krasnowski, who's doing a lot of the legwork for the budget. I gave him both of these data sets and his eyes just sparkled. This is exactly what we need to be able to forecast. Sales tax is the same thing. You remember it's 2 months behind. So two of the lowest count months, and you can see the decline just like it happened here. But the decline, the overall increase, as we go through the summertime or hit the summertime, you can see that increase happening. This peak in August right now with the sales tax is May, June. So that would suggest to me when we hit September sales tax, we've still got a peak yet to hit in sales tax. Again, the magic's going to be, what does that peak look like? So this just confirms what I had said up on the other sales tax piece. And so I'm going to continue to have these charts out there, but that's an interesting comparison.
Ben, thank you for doing that. I know we've always had these traffic counts available, but it didn't provide us any, it wasn't useful, wasn't providing us any value.
Right.
So by you taking those vehicle counts and including it into our finance reports, like you said, it'll be a leading indicator, so it'll help us see what's coming. Thank you very much for doing that.
You bet.
So I have a question, I'm sorry. So when this is very interesting chart, and I'm very glad that you asked for this, Mayor. So when you're looking at this, it can also be an indicator of, we may have as many people in town in the traffic count, but if the tourism tax revenue goes down, it may mean that they're still coming, but they're not spending as much money when they come.
Right.
Or,
Right.
you know, if there's fewer people and the tourism tax goes up, it means that they're spending more than they normally do. So that's something interesting that I think we need to take account of as recession hits and you know, people's wallets are squeezed. Are they still willing to spend some money on vacation, but maybe they're just not going to spend as much as what they had in the past?
Pam, that's an excellent point. Did you have some?
I think this might be one chart that it might make sense to, just for ease of viewability and understanding and maybe during a presentation anyways, is adjust those counts to match when the tourism tax comes in. So I think everyone on this committee understands that when you see the vehicle count in February and March, or the tourism tax down there, that visually we can adjust that back 2 months. But maybe for the general public, that we actually line up the vehicle counts with the month that the tourism tax, or vice versa, where does that make sense?
Great suggestion.
It does.
Those of us that know how
Actually,
it's
you're living in
collected.
my head right now, because I toyed with that.
Okay, thank you.
And I did not pay her to say that, by the way.
Thank you, Betsy.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. The reason I kept it this way, and I think that's a good move, and I can make that change. It's not a problem, especially for the general public, just to understand. The tourism tax month matches the month of vehicle counts. That's not a problem. The reason I did it here for you guys is just to show the delay, because you guys understand the delay for the tourism tax and the sales tax. For the general public, it's a different message, but for you guys, I just left it the way it is. What I want to do next month, I'm going to put 2019, 2021 and 2019 as 4 more sets of graphs, so you can see what the overall year looks like. You're missing part of the message here, but I want to put those in here so you have them as well.
Very, very good.
And Mayor, that's what I've got on the dashboard. We've got a lot of stuff. Like I said, we keep trying to improve this and give you more information and things that you might find the public would be interested in. And this type of information's out there. We just need to put it in a graph form. That's what we do.
So would it be possible, when I'm thinking purely from a public viewing perspective, we know because we hear this, you know, every month, we understand that, but would it be possible just to put like an executive recap, like just a few bullet points that would
Oh, yeah.
explain some of these things?
That's a good point.
That's with that, so that you're not sitting there trying to figure out exactly what's going on, because it can be very confusing. Again, we hear it all the time, so
a
it's
great
not so much, but when you just do that, you know, nobody's going to read a 3-page report, I can tell you that. I've already figured that out just from where I work at. But if it's just an executive overcap with just some key bullet points, and I think reminding people of the delay in the collection of the sales taxes versus the tourism tax would also be very good as
Absolutely.
well.
So with that explanation, and I'm visually looking at that chart on the bottom right, and if you would visually take that graph line and move it to the left 2 months, it would really tell the picture.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, it really would.
Very good.
Yeah, that's good information. In fact, I could absolutely put an executive recap on, or even around the graphs themselves, so they speak directly to the graphs. But that'd be something we want to incorporate into this dashboard on an ongoing basis. So
Yeah.
that's not a problem at all. We can redesign this a little bit so it'll make it more clear, more clear on what the graphs are doing.
Yeah.
It's a great suggestion.
So I'll accept a motion to adjourn. Oh, just kidding. Ben, are you ready to move on to number 4?
I am. Number 4 is the monthly financial reports that are in your packet. And like I said before, I'd be happy to answer any questions. Full of data. Two of the things I look at first, and I know our staff, Sunday and Jolene and Tracy put these together and do a phenomenal job of doing it. Things I look at immediately are cash balances. We show those in the graphs. Cash balances, sales tax, tourism tax, and what that's overall doing compared to what our budget is. And that way, because what we need to do within the budget process, and I'm stealing my own thunder, is develop a process to where if we do have those surpluses coming through, we can allocate them toward projects. And that's one of the processes we're going to set up as part of this budget process. But I want to get into that in the director's report. But if you're looking for guidance as to what I look for, that's immediately what I look for. Cash is king. You got to know where your cash is.
Larry, I love that idea as the board moves forward. It's always been something that even I sort of struggled with a little bit being on finance committee. I think we had conversations about that when I was on it before. When you have increases, and quite frankly, when you have decreases, that there's a plan in place that says, here's the next project that gets funded, and that's kind of decided at a director level, that's then approved at a board level, and then everyone knows if we're here, this is the next project.
Yeah.
So if we're up a little bit, we save that until we get to that point. It goes in reserve, whatever. And the same thing when you're down. So if we all know we've lived the down years, where's the first place you cut? So it's not a scramble, oh my gosh, we're missing money.
What do we do now?
What do we do? It's these guys in finance do a phenomenal job with these monthly reports, projecting. They know better than any of us sitting up here, based on what we see, based on history, here's what's going to happen. And so there's already a plan in place of what that looks like, instead of scrambling. So
And then you don't have to keep coming
love that
back
idea.
again and again to address the situation if there's already that plan in place.
Absolutely.
And
Great idea.
it stops all the delays. We can react more
Yes.
quickly.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we need to be able to be nimble enough, not just to deal with decreases like you did in 2020. And sometimes the harder choices to make are, what do you do with the surplus? Because you may have $100 million in projects, but you got $4 million to allocate that to. What do you do? And that's part of the process we're going through now with the department directors, because they're the ones on the front lines. They're the ones that see things either break or that need to be fixed. And they're the executive team of the city. What are they going to recommend to this body and the board as far as those priorities are concerned? And that's some of what we're working on, a process like that for that team, the executive team.
Do you have something else you were going to report on there, Ben?
Yeah, just I wanted to update the committee on the budget and then talk about October's meeting and kind of what I see transpiring there. But just to kind of give you a budget update, we're right in the middle of it. We had our first director's budget workshop on Monday, and they graciously allocated 4 hours for us to that discussion, all of them in the room, along with staff, their staff to talk through their budgets, their submissions, along with, other things or issues that we need to be able to nail down, and we're doing it. And I got to thank them for their time because that was a big deal. And I thought it was very successful getting that conversation flowing. As part of that process, now that we've met with them, our staff, and Colby Krasnowski particularly, is going through and building the fund summaries, modeling any kind of additions, people and capital both, but right now, mostly people. This includes accounting for debt that's been retired in 2021 and 22 within transportation and tourism funds. So that's going to relieve some pressure there to add money toward projects. We'll be meeting with Kendall and Keith on both of those funds together, so we can start talking about capital as well. We're working close with HR, being a service-driven industry. As the nature of government is, the positions we have in the city are absolutely critical to keep track of. And HR has been doing a great job, Kimberly, working with us to develop what we call a position master or position control. And what that is somebody in HR, and we've got that person, Kimberly's building it now, but that person will be in charge of all positions and maintaining or tracking those positions and be able to run scenarios for the department directors. If I add this, what happens to this? So that person will be able to work with department directors and model some of that stuff. Because just like capital, if you get surplus that may be long-term surplus, you still need to be able to react to it both capital and operational. So we need to have somebody that help them walk through that process. So we're building that now, and we're kind of having to build it from the ground up. So one of my plans was to give a lot of information to the directors. We actually have to build it now in order to give it to them. So it's coming down the road, I know that. Position request would be, any kind of position request is going to be reviewed by HR. I do a lot of these budgets, and very rarely do I have an opportunity to work with HR that has as much data as we have in HR. And a willingness to actually work on a budget is phenomenal. It's just a lot of fun talking to those guys and working through issues. Next steps, just in September, we've got a joint meeting with this body and the Board of Aldermen. I'm going to present the overview of 22, where we expect to land, because that's going to, my prediction, it's going to create a gap, if you will, that we're going to have to allocate projects to. So I'll present that 22, what 23 looks like. Also present summary on the budget changes, anything that's been added or subtracted or any kind of changes that happened in them. We'll present that as well. But I'm going to give that document to you, and here in a few minutes, I want to actually show you some of the samples that I want to give you. But after I give that to you, we'll give that to the committee that way, or the board and the committee. That way you've got something to take home and, read religiously so you can get some sleep at night. But then come back October 6th, and we'll have the workshop that have the directors walk through those changes and their budgets. I think it'll be important to hear from those individuals, because again, they know their operations better than anybody. Part of the workshop we'll go through, and I'll do this as part of the presentation too, but part of the workshop will be a review of fund reserves. So what I want to talk about is your current level of reserves. What does that do for surplus, and how do you allocate that surplus? One of the pieces of thunder that Ted just stole from me is exactly what you're talking about. And that's how do we treat public safety with some of that surplus so we can catch them up. The other night when both the public safety building and the fire station were on the agenda, I was actually on Zoom, but I was also looking at our long-term forecast and developing that forecast, plugging their requests into both sides of the public safety fund and what that would do, what would that would look like when you increase the fire station up, by $1 million. What does that do long term? Doing the same thing for the police fund. How do we maintain a level of revenue and revenue overall, whether it's a transfer in or the public safety, in a level that we can continue to add police officers, add firefighters, and not at the detriment of the fund itself. So that's all part of that discussion that we'll have coming up in the workshop. We're going to lay out a recommendation, which is what we typically do, a recommendation and have the budget based on the draft budget based on a certain recommendation. But then we can talk about it at a governing body level to see if we want to go back and reallocate that some other way. But at least it gives you a place to start that discussion. So we're most definitely having that discussion. I plugged in 1% as an increase overall for the transfer from the general fund, just again as a placeholder. It is not final by any stretch of the imagination. There's a number of different ways to benchmark those increases, and that's what Colby and I are going to go back and if we can, we will come up with a recommendation and maybe some options, but it'll include an escalation factor. What we don't want to do is that escalation factor that's going to put the general fund in harm. I don't want to say that because I don't have the whole picture in my head yet, but that'll just be a benchmark. What the chiefs are saying on the increases are exactly right. So we've got a number of things to look at. We've got reviewing the top revenues. We'll have a department discussions, including capital and operations. And then we'll establish, in my mind, a calendar for what the mayor calls the big rocks. And those are the big rocks we need to turn over for, I would call it compliance, right? Compliance issues, by whether, payers into the tourism fund or payers into sales tax. And I know Clay brought up the bonding issue for theaters. We're going to establish a calendar to come back with those issues for the board to actually discuss and hammer out and see where we want to go with them. That'll be part of the overall workshop process for the governing body and this body. And if you don't mind, I want to share my screen again and show you a couple samples of, where are we at here? There we go. I want to show you a couple samples of, I don't think it's shared. There we go. There we go. I want to show you a couple of samples of the budget. I know we had talked about giving the governing body, and I'm going to use governing body for the finance committee and board overall, more information, right? So you've got a great budget book. It's just top notch, top of the line. I would repeat that budget book for all my clients if I had the time and the staff to actually create something like that. This is the department expense summary that's currently in that book. I like this outlook, this overall rolled up summary. But one of the things that the governing body asked was more detail. So what would that more detail look like? This isn't Branson's detail. This is actually one of our other clients' detail. But what it does is take this information right here, and I'm picking on Public Works because typically they spread amongst a bunch of different funds. It takes that information and it breaks it down into sources. So what funds do they reside in? Where are they budgeted? And they could be across a number of different funds. Like in this case, the city's Public Works is primarily general fund, but they've got feet in each one of their other funds. It also, in that same section of departments, the department itself, it'll have employee summary. So that way, when you're reading through and you look at the department summary, it'll actually include employee FTEs. There's a whole other place in the budget that shows all of them together. But what we want to do is actually give you the FTEs that matches up the detail itself. That's the additions to the department piece. With the fund summaries, these are the overall summaries. We're not going to change a whole lot of this because I think this is still really good information. And it shows the trends of the overall departments, right? And this is the general fund. We have this for each fund. But one of the things, this is one of the options we have for detail. Again, back to a different client, but what this does is give you more detail about what's up in the fund summaries, right? So in this case, it's Aquatic Center Fund for this city, and it breaks it down into the major revenue sources. This is actually the account codes they reside in. And I remember, I think in this committee, somebody had mentioned, we usually see account codes. Well, what we intend on doing is just that, is put those account codes in there, and that'll serve a couple different purposes. One, when I got here, there was a common theme amongst all the departments that they didn't know what was in their budget. And when we look at that as a department, we look at that as, okay, what's in the line items? I want to know what's in the line items. The rolled up piece really doesn't matter to me as a department because I need to run my operation based on these line items. And that's going to be key. So something like this is what we've got expected as part of that budget. Now we have an option. We have what I'd like to ask you guys, your opinion on is, does that sound like we're headed in the right direction? And then two, where you want that information. Because my intent is to give you all of this information as part of the budget book on September 26th. And the department schedules will still look like this. We can put detail here and not in the fund summary, so we can go department by department. We can put them in both places, or we can put it just in the fund summaries. But what I want to do is make sure the governing body has the detail that you need or want as we walk through these budgets. So with that, I'll stop and see if you've got any comments or input you'd like to give.
Ben, this is just one example of why myself and the board feel so comfortable and confident with you and your firm by following your lead. Your lead on coming up with things like this. This is extremely important. If the board if this board has any input or suggestions, that Ben is open ears.
Absolutely.
My suggestion might be, again, follow your lead with these kinds of things that are on the screen, and then at that point, the board may come back and say, can we change this, can we amend that? But I think what your basic structure is, I think is spot on. Is any board member feel differently?
I just would like to add, thank you so much, Ben. This is really going to provide a lot of clarification, not just for decision-making, but answering questions from our public that comes in with continual questions. It's going to make it so much easier for them to access this information and be able to answer their own questions and continue to provide input. Thank you.
Lisa?
Your Honor, I think also, Ben hasn't said this, but he has told me that we won't be using the budget magazine this year, so that's a little bit, so it will just be the details, as you're seeing. Just a change, so you know.
No pictures?
I don't know, he might have some pictures. I think Ben's into graphs and dashboards, not
Let's
pictures.
take that, we'll take that question tongue in cheek.
Ralph, you can't just use a picture book. You have to read it.
It's a different book you're referring to.
Yeah, no, what I typically do, and the way it's been set up in the past for Budget Magazine and in the budget, I am not going to knock that at all. That is great information to put out in the public. We're going to shortcut it though. The budget book itself is what we're going to be giving to you guys as a draft. There'll be more we add to it for the budget award you guys received every single year. We'll add more to it, but what you'll receive is a lot of what's in that budget book now. And there'll be summaries, there'll be graphs, because not everybody, I mean, I've watched certain individuals' eyes glaze over when they see numbers. Doesn't mean anything to them. And several of my family does the same thing. Put it in a picture and I'll understand it. So that's the reason behind the dashboard. But we'll put some of those graphs in there to kind of show that. You know, where are the overall, when you look at a department, what's the most cost they have? Is it personnel, commodities, capital? When you look at some departments, they may be low on personnel and huge on capital.
Right.
That kind of tells a story, right? And that kind of graph would mean something. You've got a lot of that built into the budget already. We don't have to recreate the wheel. So you were just going to get it up front. And my intent is to kind of walk through that budget then the 26th and kind of how to read it, what to look for. And then when we hit the ground running on the 6th, we'll just keep on going.
I have to believe this would be an extremely valuable tool for our directors to help manage each department.
Yeah. That's a good point, Mayor. One of the things there's a couple of things that need to happen. The department directors right now get an expense report, budget to actual expense report, but what they don't get right now from us is what I just gave you, and that's the overall dashboard, the overall where are we kind of information. And I know Lisa's got department meetings set up, and I'm going to start attending those meetings, whether it's by Zoom or in person. And what I'd like to do, I'm going to give them an update, maybe even more detail, but an update where we are in certain key funds. That way they know where we're at. I mean, it kind of hurts me to think that department directors don't know where we're at. That's up to us to fix that, and that's going to be fixed. But we need to continue that conversation. We've got the structure set up to do it. I'm just going to take advantage of it. So that is another step that we need to take, and we're going to take it soon. Well, it'll have to be September because they're going to be in front of you.
Yeah. Chief Martin, did Ben answer the questions that you were asking specifically? Did he miss anything that you specifically were asking? Spot on. Okay. Thank you, Chief.
The only other thing I've got is, okay, so for expectations in October's meeting, we still need to do a review of the Branson Convention Center and their incentive fee. So my plan is to bring back to this body the incentive fee criteria, the 6 criteria, talk about those criteria to get a basic understanding of what they are. We've asked the convention center to go ahead and respond to each one of the criteria, so we have a benchmark to go by. What I want to do is bring the criteria and their response to it back to you as a finance committee, so we can talk about what that looks like. And if you need additional information in order to be able to rate those criteria for the convention center. But I want to do 2 things. 1, give you enough information. And then 2 is give you enough time. So we have an option either to move the rating that meeting, or take that, digest it, and do it in the November meeting. And if it's this body's wish, we could actually have them on site in October to kind of go through their rankings if they see it. I know they'd be wide open to that conversation. They were on the edge of their seat, ready to give us anything we need. They're also going to give us their capital needs, obviously, and we'll put that into the capital budget as well. But that's what I want to do for October and November. I just wanted to kind of give you a heads up where we're at.
Wow. You said a lot.
That should have been an agenda, so I'm sorry.
That's fine. Anybody in the audience wishing to ask any questions or clarity or suggestions? Chief, you're looking at me kind of funny. No? You're good?
Hey, Ben, on behalf of, I think, all directors, thank you for that last piece up there. Managing our budgets with a 2-month-old PDF that we typically get is very difficult. And you've heard from our staff how we try to track our budgets through an Excel spreadsheet. Right. And it's kind of like when we balance our personal checkbooks. You keep it in the registry, and then you look online and try to figure out what has not hit yet, and it's difficult when you're dealing with numbers sometimes that we deal with. So, Ben, the direction you just showed us is greatly appreciated by me, and I'm sure that my peers out here would say the same thing.
Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, Chief. Any other comments? Any comments or questions from the board? Lisa?
A couple, when we talk about the incentive fees, I know Ben's being gracious to give time, but we also have to bring those back to the actual Board of Aldermen for approval, and that's 2 reads. So if you want time, that's great. If you don't need the time, we'll use it on the back end for approval by the board and go through it with the board also.
That'd be great.
So just kind of keeping that in mind, the calendar starts getting pretty tight to roll some of those through. Also, to add to the budget book, the compensation plan for all employees will be added.
That's right.
By Jan is working with that, so that's being added into that book also. So that will be laid out for every position and the plan for that the departments go by and Jan goes, and his department goes by for hiring.
Lisa, my gut feeling is, with the format that Ben's providing and the information he's providing and getting direction directly from the directors of each department, I'm not anticipating this process to take a lot of time. I think it's going to be spelled out. I think it's going to be clear, and I don't think it's going to take us a lot of time to digest this information.
Yeah.
That'd be great. And the incentive fees for the convention
Sure.
center too.
And I
So
think that's simple. That'll be an
Great.
easy one also.
we'll plan on it that way, then that gives Ben a direction, and then that keeps us moving it forward, because we also, as Ben is working on the budget, we're working on the calendars to keep you on track, because
Sure. Yeah, that's right.
they go very fast, the
Yes.
dates. So, and as you know, a lot of information besides budget, besides what we're hearing, is trying to get what you, the board, wants for presentations for additional information outside. So that is constantly a rolling dates and trying to keep it going for you.
Is there any board member feel differently about the timing? I don't know that this needs to be drug out. I'm open for the board members' opinions. You good? Okay, so that's the direction, Ben. Let's go chop chop.
No problem. Well, that's what we anticipated, bringing it up to you. I had one other thing that just escaped my brain. Oh, well. I think that, Mayor, I think that's all I have for you today. That's right at an hour.
Wow. Well, if Ben's done and there's no more questions, I will entertain a motion to adjourn, unless there's any final comments. What's that?
Oh, it said reports.
I know. They're in there, and we've already reviewed them before the meeting. Anything?
Good meeting.
Great meeting. Thank you so much, Ben. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. I'll make a motion.
Second?
A motion is second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Ayes have it. Thank you very, very much. And thank you, directors.
Have a great day.
Sound like Jan and Kimberly are fixing up in the HR department up there. Sounds like Jan and Kimberly.